Hey guys, this is Matt Wilson, and I'm going to do a show today, a video on the 1970s career of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. I'm going to try to cover everything that they did as a band and as solo artists and duo artists. I'm only doing the 70s because, well, I'll start with 69, of course, because that's the first Crosby, Stills, Nash album. But I'm not going to go into the 80s or the 90s or the 21st century because there's too much to cover. And besides, I think that their greatest era was the 70s. So I'm going to show you guys CDs because that's what I have. Like I said, in 1969, their album, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, this is the old, I think it's a 1993 Atlantic Gold disc. It's a virtually perfect album. It's I'm gonna say it's like a 5-star record. Every song is really good, and it's a perfect vehicle for all three of those guys to express themselves. And it's debatable if they ever made it better. Certainly as a trio, they never bettered that one. Whether you think that, Deja Vu is a better record, we'll get to that in a second. Here's another one I have. This is the Steve Hoffman, the audio fidelity. I guess this one sounds better, but I'm not an audiophile, so I'll leave it to the experts to figure that one out. But this is as good a record as they made as a trio. Neil Young joined in before 1969 was over. He joined before Woodstock. He's playing with them at Woodstock. Only he's not in the movie because he didn't want to be photographed. For whatever reason, Neil being Neil. So, but he was with the band from like, I don't remember now, the summer on, or the fall on. I've got a poster of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. I'm looking at it right now. It's on the other wall. And they were a big act at the time. So I'll get to their live album in a second. But with Neil on board, their only album in the 70s as a quartet is this one, Deja Vu, which is, hey, another classic, another album where everything is great. I mean, I wouldn't change it. It may not quite reach the perfection of the first album, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, but who am I kidding? Those are the two best albums that they ever made, either as a trio or as a quartet. Here's something that is pretty cool. Came out a while back. Is this big box set. It's just CDs. I don't think that there's any, there's nothing in 5.1 or anything, but it has a lot of outtakes that I was unaware of, and nothing on the back. And they're good, like a lot of Stephen Stills songs in particular that I was unaware of. So if you're interested, there you go. And after that, there's not a whole lot in the 70s. Finding it here, looking for their live album. See, I got way too much stuff on this table. It took me a long time to find everything. And I still didn't find everything I wanted to show. Oh, here it is. Okay. So in 1971, there's Four-Way Street, and it's pretty good. Now this double CD has the entire album plus bonus tracks, from those same nights at the Fillmore, I think. They were already not getting along though by this time, so this was supposed to be released, I believe, for Christmas time in 1970, but they couldn't all get together, as a quartet to decide what tracks should be on. So it didn't come out till the spring of 71, I want to say, where it went to number 1. but it's too bad it couldn't have come out in 1970 because they should have made another album in 1971, but they didn't. In fact, they had a greatest hits album with a Joni Mitchell cover called So Far, I want to say, in 1974, where they toured, and Graham Nash put this together 40 years later. This is, what is this? It's 3 CDs and then a bonus DVD, like an amalgamation of shows that they did. It's not just one show, but it's good. And if I'm gonna make the call, I'm gonna say it's better than just getting Four-Way Street. You get a bunch of new Neil Young songs, new for the time in '74. Well, there's new stuff on here too, but it's it's 3 discs, 2 discs, plus a DVD. Well, get them both because I think that's pretty much it in terms of live CSNY. Of course, there's the Woodstock album where they do Sea of Madness, which is not recorded at Woodstock, by the way. That's actually, Sea of Madness is actually recorded on a show prior to Woodstock in '69. And to finish up CSN, because there's nothing else from CSNY, there's the Boat album, or well, it's just called CSN. Came out in 1977. It is their second best album, in my estimation. Better than anything that they did in the 80s or 90s or any time. In fact, one could argue that if you really only were going to get 2 Crosby, Stills and Nash albums, it would be the debut and the CSN Boat album. It's not quite as good as the 1969 LP, but it's really good. This is another Audio Fidelity Steve Hoffman disc. So there we go with that, and that pretty much rounds it up for either the trio or the quartet. So, but we're not done, because these guys all put forth a lot of good music in the 70s, and so I'm going to look at. Well, let's go in order. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. David Crosby, who was frequently a partner with Graham Nash, he only did that one album. If I could only remember my name. This is like a DVD set with a 5.1 mix and a bonus track. I like the album a lot, so I do recommend it. But it's Crosby. I mean, you have to understand that when you buy it, a lot of these songs are just it's a lot of harmony. Sometimes there's no words. It almost sounds like Gregorian chants or something like that. And if you know David's stuff from the Byrds and from Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and then Young, it's not going to surprise you. But I know people that like that album. Let me hold it up again. People that like this album, but they don't even like CSN or CSNY. So go figure. The Vatican, of all institutions, is also a big fan of this record. And he would not make another solo album until the 70s, until he was out of jail. So it's kind of special in that regard. Okay, Stills. Stephen Stills. All right, so with Stephen, his first album, and still one of his best, Stephen Stills, 1970. It packs a hell of a punch. It's got a track with Clapton. It's got a track with Hendrix. It's got Stephen's excellent musicianship. It's got the hit "Love the One You're With." I mean, this is not a bad place to start with his career. If you have the CSN and the CSNY stuff, and you want to investigate Stephen's career, I would go with that one first. Stephen Stills 2 came out in '71, and it's also good. It's to my ears, it's not as good as the first album, but I used to hear Change Partners on the radio, and Mary Ann, those songs almost made the top 40. And this was a time, you know, when he was still regarded as a major figure. So it took a little bit longer for this album to grow on me than the first one, but it's certainly worthy and certainly among his best albums. Here's a little something that just came out not too long ago. Here's a live show from Berkeley, yeah, in 1971. It's got a lot of stuff on there, solo stuff that would be on the first two albums. What else does it have? He brings out Crosby, that's right. They do The Lee Shore. The Lee Shore was a good song that was only available at the time on the live CSNY album. But if that's something I forgot to get is the CSN box set. Oh well, it's somewhere in my apartment here. The 1991 CSN box set, it's just called CSN, has a studio version of The Lee Shore, which I think is better than the live one that's on Four-Way Street. So there you go. Little plug for that song. In 1972, Manassas. This is a double album, folks, and virtually every song is good. This is probably the one I'm going to reach for if I'm going to play a Stephen album. This was a whole band. You know, it wasn't just Stephen Stills, even though, you know, he's got his name there above the title. He wrote most of the stuff on here. Chris Hillman from the Byrds is also present, like Stephen's co-captain. And this is the last time I think he really essayed an album of this quality. I mean, after this, he would still come up with, you know, great material, but not covering an entire album like this. And this is a double, you know. So now, a CD that I looked for a long time today is Manassas' second album called Down the Road. Could not find it. I have a nice Japanese CD of that. It's a remaster. The sound quality is good. So, you know, sorry folks, couldn't find it. Things are spread out here. But it's not as good as the first Manassas album, but it's not bad. I mean, people put that record down. I'd say 4, maybe even 5 tracks really work on that album. It's the same band. It's just, you know, they had kind of, you know, shot their wad, or the muse had left them or him by that point. I mean, Stephen was essaying albums, you know, a lot of songs on albums by that point in 1973 since 1966. So had Neil Young. But I think that's probably around the time, if not before, when it was becoming obvious that Neil Young was going to be of more lasting value in terms of those, all 4 of those guys. His stuff was going to probably survive the test of time better. But Stephen, he has plenty of great material in the 70s. So anyways, it's Down the Road, Manassas, 1973. Not bad, but not, you know, not great. So here's a little something that came out a while back. This is from Rhino. It's a Manassas kind of compilation, but it's I think it's all unreleased stuff. Pieces. It's all right. I'd probably say it's not even as good as Down the Road, but it's got some, like the first song is called Witching Hour. That's a good one. That should have been released on one of those records. I like it, but I'm a fan. So if you're a big Manassas guy and you don't have this, yeah, consider picking it up. All right, back to his solo career. This is old. I got this about 20 years ago, maybe. This is an old DTS surround sound mix of his 1975 album called Stills. It's pretty good. I once read a really overly enthusiastic article on Stephen in Mojo magazine where they rated this a 5-star. I'm not going to say it's that good, but you know, at least half of it works. Some of the stuff goes back a few years before it was released. This is, in many people's eyes, this is the last solid album he made. You know, if Manassas is the last great album, this might be the last solid one. Anyways, but that's, folks, remember, everything I'm saying here is just my opinion. So if you think Stephen released great albums after this, hey, more power to you. Okay, after that, I have one of those, these BGO records, little, I can't even call them boxes, it's just 2 CDs of his next 3 albums, including stills. So it's not his next 3 albums, it's the next 2 albums. There's Illegal Stills right there, which came out in '76 and is okay. You know, 2, 3 good cuts. He does the album with another guy whom I should have prepared this and looked at the names. His name was Donnie something, who later joined Chicago, which I don't think he needed to give that guy all that power on a Stephen Stills album, but there you go. And then there's the rather awful Thoroughfare Gap. Thoroughfare Gap came out in '78 after the CSN album. It's pretty bad, folks. In fact, if I have to make a call, I'm gonna say that's the worst album that any of the 4 guys released in the 1970s. There's also a live Stephen Stills record that I don't have, so can't even tell you what it's called. Maybe Stephen Stills Live. But I'm happy with that 1971 Berkeley concert. And that does it for Stephen. Oh, one more thing I can show you. Graham Nash compiled box sets for Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And the one he did for Stephen Stills is the biggest one with 4 discs. It covers his whole career up until the point this was made. I do recommend it. It's got obvious highlights and a lot of stuff I hadn't heard before. Good sound quality. It's, you know, it's a nice thick. If you're a fan of Stephen and you just want more than like a standard greatest hits, this is it. This is it. All right, Crosby, Stills, Nash. Let's do Nash now. Ooh, that's right. Let's do this. I didn't find. Okay. Anyways, his first album is called Graham Nash, Songs for Beginners. This is an old CD. It does not sound great. I like this better. This is a Japanese remaster. This is what I play when I want to hear the album. It doesn't have the intro, though, to one of the songs. It may have been I Used to Be a King, but I can't remember now. But if you want to get the intro to that song, go to the 1991 CSN box set. It has the album. It has that song remastered, not a remix. You can make yourself a playlist using this and that version of I Used to Be a King. Here is a 5.1 mix by Rhino on a DVD audio, you know, much the same way that they did it for the Crosby album. This is his best record, guys. This is I don't know if it's a 5-star album, but it's pretty close. I would say this is a classic, and it's the best album he ever made. Now, I also couldn't find his second album, which is Wild Tales. I like Wild Tales. Wild Tales came out in early '74, I think. Songs for Beginners is 1971, same year as Crosby's, if I can only remember my name. But Wild Tales is that's what he named his autobiography after. It's again, not quite as good as Songs for Beginners, but lots of good stuff on there. And it's too bad that he did not make any other albums in the decade. He did do this one, which I shouldn't even be mentioning because it's not in the 70s, Earth and Sky, which some people like. I don't feel it's on the level of the first two. But yeah, he wasn't tremendously prolific as a solo artist. But he did do albums with David. So let's get to that. Let me find him. Okay. I'm going to start off with Another Stony Evening. This did not come out in the 70s. This is a live set from, I don't remember, 70 or 71. And it's going to take the place in my collection of the official live Crosby and Nash album, which I don't have. Just like I don't have the official live Stephen Stills album released in the 70s. But this is pretty good. I would recommend this. Their first album proper is called Graham Nash, David Crosby. Now, this is a remaster which, God, is this a Japanese album? I don't know. It says Atlantic, but I don't know if this was available in the States. But it sounds good. This is what I would recommend to you if you want. That's the cover. It's got the, if you want this on CD. That's 1972. In 75, this is the booklet for Wind on the Water, which is probably my favorite Crosby and Nash album. My jewel case has a crack on it, so I pulled out this to show you. Cut for cut, I think this is the best. It's amazing to me that these old hippies could still be making music, which I feel is relevant in 1975, because a lot of people, you know, who were big time in the 60s had kind of lost their muse by the mid 70s. And lastly, there's Whistling Down the Wire, which might be the least of the three, but it's still pretty good. I like plenty of tracks on here. So there you go. That's their three albums, and then they had a live album, like I told you, which I do not have. Okay, folks. Oh, you know what I should have showed you also? Graham's own box for himself. Graham Nash. Which is called Graham Nash, I think. 3 CDs. He chose it. Starts off with the Hollies, you know, solo career, CSNY. Just like the Stills 4-disc box was the ultimate way to look at Stephen's career, if you want to look, you know, for a retrospective, this will do for Graham. And since I already passed him by, better late than never, the David Crosby one. Crosby, lots of great stuff, you know, Birds, solo, stuff with Graham, CSN, CSNY. For a guy who's not considered to be, I don't know, like a major artist, if you wanted to compile a best of David Crosby, just the stuff that he's played on, sung on, you could put together a really, really good hour or so of nothing but songs that you know. So that's it. I recommend all 3 of those boxes. Of course, Graham couldn't make a box for Neil. Neil does that kind of stuff himself. And I have saved him for last, so let's go. This is his first album. It came out in 1968. He was fresh out of the Buffalo Springfield, and he didn't like the mix, so of just a few songs, from what I understand, not even the whole LP. So he withdrew the album, remixed, 3-4 cuts, you know, someone could tell me in the comments, and re-released it in 1969, and that's the version you get on CD. I don't know. I think if you go to his website, you can hear the original mixes of those cuts that he didn't like. But I don't think, to my knowledge, you can buy this album in its 1968 mix. It's not bad. To me, it's very much like the Springfield, but not as good. I'll take any of the 3 Springfield albums over this. But it's not bad. It's Neil Young, you know. This is the first album he made with Crazy Horse. Everybody knows this is Nowhere. It's a great album. Everyone knows that. It's got probably 4 cuts that are quintessential Neil. The title track, Cinnamon Girl, and the 2 long ones, Down by the River and Cowgirl in the Sand. My mind went blank. Those 4 songs alone make this, and then some other cuts on here are songs he had originally done with Buffalo Springfield. All right. Here's After the Gold Rush. For many years, my favorite Neil Young album. I don't know if I have a favorite Neil Young album now, but this is a 5-star classic. You know, just like Deja Vu is that year. So that's 2 albums that are classic records in 1970 that Neil Young was a part of. All right. Harvest, another 5-star album. People tend to put this record down. People tend to say, oh, it's not as good as insert your favorite Neil Young album title. But cut for cut, this is still among the best things here. Oh, I got a 5.1 mix of this too, which I forgot to pull out. Oh, well, too late now. All right, so he was at the height of his popularity here, you know, and hits, you know, Heart of Gold, Old Man. Next, I have one of these original release series boxes, and I like it because it's got Time Fades Away, which was a 1973 live album of all new material, or material at least that you didn't hear it before it was released on LP. It wasn't on vinyl. This is pretty good. He doesn't like it, but you know, I'd rather hear this than say the first album. Then we have On the Beach, great record from 1974. This is probably one of his better albums of the decade, but he did so many good albums. I was trying to think before I started the show what my least favorite Neil Young album of the decade is, and I don't know if I have one, you know? You can see I've already skipped over Journey Through the Past, which is it was a soundtrack to a movie that he did. The album or the movie came out in 72, 73. Anyways, it's the only 70s Neil Young album that he has not put out on CD. And I think that's because it's got a Beach Boys song on there. Not a song that Neil Young covers that's a Beach Boys song, but an actual cut from Pet Sounds, which it's in the movie, so he put it on the soundtrack. There's stuff from the Buffalo Springfield on a talk show, so I don't think maybe he wants to license that. I mean, I don't know why that's not on CD, but anyways. Then we got Tonight's the Night, which is awesome. This is like his drug album, recorded in 73, released in 75. It's like an homage to Danny Whitten, you know, from Crazy Horse, and Bruce Berry, his roadie, but it's really intense stuff. And the songs are all good, and it's got that really kind of stonery vibe that when I was first getting into Neil Young in high school, this was a lot of people's favorite Neil Young album. So I'm probably going to say I like this one more than On the Beach. And finally, also released in 75, is Zuma. Zuma's another record with Crazy Horse, and another strong Neil Young album. You know, so that year, 75, there was 2 Neil Young albums. There's a pretty good Stephen Stills album, and my favorite Crosby and Nash record. They should have been staying together as a quartet and releasing albums. All right, so that's it for this first little box, the original release series, discs 5 to 8. Another one I have here, which is going to round out the 70s. All right. What do you call this? Discs 8.5 to 12. Neil is so funny. All right, so let's go through those. This one, Long May You Run. It came out in '76. It's an album he made with Steven, but there's this feeling when you listen to it that neither guy is bringing his A game. Neil, because who knows? I mean, he's saving his best stuff for his solo records, and Steven, because I think that Steven was releasing too much stuff this year. I mean, this same year, he did Illegal Stills, and there's only 2 or 3 decent cuts on that album, in my estimation. But it does have the title track, Long May You Run, which is a classic. And Crosby and Nash were going to do backing vocals for this whole album. But then they got, negotiations broke down and they weren't getting along. So Neil and Steven wiped the vocals. But you can get some of those songs. There's like 3 or 4 of those songs now have been released on other compilations or whatever with Crosby and Nash's backing vocals. For instance, the version of the title song, Long May You Run, that's on the Decade album, which I also forgot to bring out. The Decade album, that's got Crosby and Nash's vocals on it. So, hey. All right. In '77, American Stars and Bars. This is the same year, I think, that Decade came out. There's really good stuff on here. It's not as strong as the 73 through 75 records, but it's still good. I mean, like I said, Neil did not make mediocre albums at this point in his career. And the fact this was released the same year as Decade, which also had a clutch of songs on it which were unreleased at the time and are great. He was still a major artist for this year. Comes a time, 1978. This is pretty good. This is like a folky album, which kind of like a return to the After the Gold Rush or Harvest sound, right? I guess I should be looking at the song titles, but I'm more of like an album guy, so I give you my overall impressions of the album more than the songs. This has, it's got A Lot of Love, which Nicolette Larson would make into a hit the very next year. 4 Strong Winds, which I associate with Ian and Sylvia. Anyways, Human Highway, which he'd had that song for a while, I think. I like it. But he has a tremendous year in '79, releasing these 2 live albums. We got Rust Never Sleeps, another classic, and perhaps the first classic Neil Young album since '75. This is live, but it's with Crazy Horse. It's all new material. Half of this is acoustic, half of this is electric. Stunning. I don't know of an artist in 1979 who had been around since the mid-'60s, which is, 1966 is the first Buffalo Springfield record, who was making albums this relevant at the end of the '70s. Classic. And then the standard live double, which so many artists were releasing during that time. This is Live Rust, and it's good. I don't think there's anything new on here, but just, it functions as a Neil Young's greatest hits for 1979, 2 years after Decade, which was a Neil Young's greatest hits for '77. So that's it for the albums. Since I pulled these out, I might as well show you. I'm not going to do like any kind of unboxing or anything, but this is the archives. The Blu-ray archives, Neil Young. Oh, my bad. I grabbed volume 2 when I should have grabbed volume 1. Put that aside. This is volume 1, a little heavier. This is the Blu-ray set. This is from, this goes to '72, I think. Doesn't even have the dates on here, but this is really good. They're all Blu-rays. There was a CD version where everything was on CD. There was a DVD version, and there's the Blu-ray version. Definitely, if you have a Blu-ray player, get the Blu-ray version. At the time, there was so much stuff on here I had never heard before. There's the Journey Through the Past movie. There's all kinds of Easter eggs and hidden stuff. And this was rare for a while. But now, last time I looked online on Discogs, it isn't even that expensive anymore. So no excuse not to get it. Here was the second volume, which I held up wrongly. This came out a few years back. This is CD only. So if you're looking for, any kind of video, it's not going to happen. This is also, I thought this was going to sell out really quickly, but you can get this for like a deal. I think it may be more expensive though than the volume 1, but this is not bad. And they just announced, you can get it now for a pre-order. They just announced volume 3. So anyways, that does it for me. That was, wow, 36 minutes. I know I rushed through everything quickly, but I had a lot to cover. If I do one of these videos again, I promise you I won't do this many albums, and I'll spend more time on each LP. Thanks.